Victoria Langley had always moved through the world as if it belonged to her. A billionaire heiress by birth and a shrewd businesswoman by design, she had built her empire with a combination of intellect, charm, and relentless ambition. Her name appeared in magazines, online articles, and boardroom discussions alike, a symbol of power, success, and unshakable confidence. She had lived her life surrounded by the trappings of wealth, skyscraper offices with panoramic views, luxury cars parked like ornaments outside her buildings, and a staff whose sole purpose seemed to revolve around maintaining her comfort and convenience. Victoria had never truly experienced failure, at least not on a scale that could threaten her position, and her sense of control had been absolute. Every decision, every investment, every move she made was calculated to ensure that she remained untouchable. She walked through her life with a kind of unspoken assurance, knowing that the world would always accommodate her, but life, as it often does, has a way of testing even the most formidable of figures. On a morning that began like any other, Victoria awoke to news that would shatter the foundation of her carefully constructed world. Her financial empire, once vast and seemingly impervious, had crumbled almost overnight. A series of unexpected legal disputes, failed investments, and market fluctuations had combined in a way that left her with nothing. No properties, no liquid assets, no backup plans. The headlines were merciless: billionaire heiress bankrupt, Victoria Langley's fortune gone in 24 hours, and empire collapses. What happened to the woman who had everything? It was not only a personal catastrophe, it was public humiliation, and it was swift. The sense of control that had defined her life vanished in a blur of numbers, graphs, and legal notices. Victoria stepped out into the city streets that morning, her tailored suits now replaced with modest clothing she had purchased in haste, items that carried none of the confidence or status she was accustomed to. The city, once a landscape she had dominated from towering glass offices and luxury vehicles, now felt foreign, unwelcoming, and indifferent. People walked past her without recognition, strangers' eyes sliding over her as if she were invisible. Her fortune had been the lens through which the world saw her, and now that lens had shattered, leaving her unrecognized and unmoored. The contrast was stark, almost cruel. One day, she had commanded attention and respect; the next, she was just another face in the crowd, a woman with a suitcase and no clear path forward. She wandered through streets that had once been familiar, noticing small details she had ignored in her life of wealth. The cracks in the pavement, the way sunlight fell on storefront windows, the faint smell of fresh bread from a corner bakery, all of it seemed magnified by her sudden vulnerability. For years, she had focused on what she wanted, pushing aside anything that didn't serve her ambitions. Now, stripped of her fortune and her staff, she was confronted with the ordinary world in all its rawness. The realization hit her in waves: she had built a life designed to impress and control others, but she had never learned how to navigate a world without that structure. As she made her way toward the towering skyscraper where she once held executive meetings, the enormity of her loss weighed heavily on her. She was no longer a figure of influence, no longer a person whose presence could command rooms and meetings. Every corner of the city seemed to reflect her fall: cars she could no longer afford, restaurants she could no longer enter, and a constant reminder that her carefully curated network of connections no longer mattered. The irony was not lost on her. For a woman who had prided herself on independence, strength, and self-reliance, the abrupt exposure to vulnerability was almost unbearable. Her journey through the city became a study in human observation. People moved with purpose, their faces focused and unreadable, yet she noticed the small kindnesses: a stranger holding a door, a passerby offering a smile, a mother guiding her child across the street. She realized she had been blind to these details her entire life, too focused on her own success to notice the ordinary acts of humanity that occurred around her every day. The contrast between her former life and this reality was sharp, almost painful. She had once believed that wealth equated to power, that control over resources meant control over life itself. Now she understood the fragility of that illusion. By mid-morning, Victoria arrived at the corporate building she had once owned space in, its lobby familiar yet alien in her current state. She entered quietly, hoping to find a sense of direction, a thread of the life she had lost. The grandeur of the marble floors and high ceilings was now meaningless, a reminder of what she had taken for granted. She had no access to her former offices, no way to reach the contacts who once obeyed her calls without question. The lobby was busy with employees and visitors, each absorbed in their own tasks, none noticing her, none recognizing the fallen billionaire who had once been a figure of admiration and fear. It was in this ordinary environment that fate intervened. She was exhausted, disoriented, and unsure of what to do next when she noticed a man approaching. He was dressed simply, his clothing functional rather than fashionable, carrying the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to hard work rather than power. His gaze met hers, calm and unjudging. There was no recognition of her former status, no awe, no expectation. For the first time that day, Victoria felt seen not as a name, a brand, or a figure of wealth, but as a human being in need. The man did not hesitate, did not question, did not ask for her identification or proof of status. He simply asked if she was okay, offering her a chair and a glass of water with a sincerity that was entirely foreign to her. This simple act of kindness, this brief moment of human decency, struck Victoria with a force she had never anticipated. For a woman accustomed to the transactional nature of her relationships, the genuine concern of a stranger was almost disarming. She felt the walls she had built around herself, walls fortified by years of success, ambition, and the need to appear unshakable, begin to crumble. The realization was startling. She had spent her life pursuing things that could vanish in an instant, yet something as simple as empathy and human connection had the power to change everything. As she sat there, sipping the water, Victoria reflected on the fragility of her world. Wealth had insulated her from the ordinary challenges of life, but it had also blinded her to the fundamental truths of human existence. She had never had to rely on anyone for help, never had to confront vulnerability without the shield of her fortune. And now, stripped of everything, she faced not just loss, but revelation, that life's true value lies not in money or status, but in moments of compassion, in the quiet courage of ordinary people, and in the unexpected ways the world can intervene to guide one toward humility and understanding. In those quiet minutes, Victoria Langley, the billionaire who had lost everything, discovered the first glimmer of something far more valuable than her vanished fortune, the recognition that life is not defined by wealth, but by the capacity to receive and give kindness when it matters most. The city continued around her, indifferent yet alive, and for the first time, she understood that her journey was not over. It had only just begun. Victoria Langley's life had been defined by precision, power, and predictability. Every move she made, every contract she signed, every investment she undertook was calculated to maintain control. Yet in the span of a single morning, all of that had evaporated, leaving her disoriented and vulnerable. She wandered through the lobby of the corporate building that she had once owned space in, feeling the weight of emptiness press down on her like a physical force. The marble floors and polished surfaces that had once impressed clients and employees alike now reflected only her fragility, reminding her that no matter how tall the skyscraper or how impressive the nameplate, human life could be stripped down to its simplest, most unprotected form. She felt small, adrift, and entirely exposed. It was in this precise moment of disorientation that she encountered him, Ethan Rivers, a man whose presence was unassuming but radiated quiet steadiness. He was a janitor, dressed in simple work clothes that carried the scent of cleaning supplies and hard labor. He moved with a calm purpose, tending to his duties without fanfare or expectation, yet when he noticed Victoria, he instinctively understood that she needed help. There was no hesitation, no glance at her outward appearance or the signs of her previous life, he simply offered his assistance. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice steady and warm, carrying no hint of judgment or curiosity beyond genuine concern. The simplicity of the question disarmed Victoria, who had long been surrounded by people whose words were layered with motives, obligations, or strategic calculations. She realized that she was encountering a form of human decency that could not be measured in contracts or accolades. Victoria hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Her life had always been transactional, every interaction had a price or a purpose, and kindness was often a strategic move rather than a spontaneous act. Yet here was a man who asked nothing of her, offering only help because it was the right thing to do. He guided her to a nearby bench, helping her to sit down when her legs trembled from exhaustion. He handed her a bottle of water, and she accepted it with a silent gratitude she hadn't felt in years. The act was small, but it carried the weight of recognition, of acknowledgement that she was seen not as a billionaire or a symbol of wealth, but as a human being in need of compassion. Beside him sat his daughter, Lily, a child of 8 whose eyes shone with curiosity and warmth. She observed Victoria quietly, with a maturity that belied her age, offering an innocent smile that conveyed empathy without words. The child had been raised in a world of modest means, yet her perception of humanity was sharp and untainted by the hierarchies and pretenses that had dominated Victoria's life. Lily's presence added a layer of comfort that Victoria had not anticipated. There was no judgment, no awe, no distance created by money or status, only an understanding that transcended wealth and social standing. As Victoria regained her breath and composure, the conversation that unfolded was remarkable for its simplicity. She began to share fragments of her story, recounting the collapse of her empire, the legal battles, and the shocking speed at which her fortune had disappeared. Each sentence carried both shock and disbelief, yet Ethan did not interrupt, did not question, and did not express condescension. He listened with patience, allowing her words to fill the space without evaluating them through the lens of power or judgment. It was a dynamic Victoria had never experienced before, a conversation free from the layers of manipulation and strategy that had always dominated her interactions. In those moments, she recognized the profound value of someone willing to listen without agenda. The more she spoke, the more she realized the stark contrast between her former life and the world she had entered. For decades, she had measured herself against wealth, influence, and recognition. Yet here, in a modest office lobby with a janitor and his daughter, she experienced a sense of connection that no amount of money had ever provided. The gestures of simple kindness, the offer of water, the quiet attentiveness, the child's innocent presence, revealed a wealth far more enduring than her billions, the richness of genuine human empathy. She felt something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of being valued for her humanity rather than her bank account. Ethan, for his part, continued his work while offering quiet guidance and reassurance. He explained nothing about her former status, because it did not matter to him. What mattered was that she was struggling and needed support. There was an authenticity in his approach that contrasted sharply with the performative politeness Victoria had been surrounded by her entire life. He moved with competence, attending to his tasks with efficiency, yet he paused frequently to check on her, ensuring that she was safe, hydrated, and able to stand if she wished. His attentiveness was neither intrusive nor calculated, it was simply the natural response of someone who recognized vulnerability and chose to respond with humanity. Victoria's mind began to shift in subtle ways. She observed Ethan's interactions with his daughter, the patience with which he guided her, the humor he employed to keep her spirits high despite their modest means, and the integrity with which he navigated the challenges of daily life. Here was a man who had little material wealth yet commanded a form of respect and admiration that could not be bought. He had built his life around values that were invisible on a balance sheet: dedication, responsibility, and compassion. Witnessing this, Victoria felt a pang of self-awareness. Her life, though abundant in material wealth, had been impoverished in these fundamental qualities. The conversation deepened as they spoke of family, responsibility, and the unexpected turns life can take. Ethan shared the challenges he faced raising Lily alone, working long hours to provide for her while balancing the demands of a world that often ignored people like him. Victoria listened, humbled by the resilience required to navigate life without the safety net she had always relied upon. It was a lesson in humility, a realization that wealth could not insulate anyone from hardship, but human character, courage, and dedication could create a foundation far stronger than gold. Even brief moments of connection carried immense weight. As Lily offered Victoria a small snack she had saved for herself, the gesture spoke volumes about generosity, innocence, and selflessness. Victoria realized that these qualities had been absent from her life, replaced by the pursuit of status, profit, and admiration. The small kindness of a child and the steady support of her father reflected a form of richness she had never experienced, richness that could not be bought, manipulated, or controlled. Time passed almost imperceptibly as Victoria absorbed these lessons. Her panic and despair began to ebb, replaced by clarity and a sense of groundedness she had never known in her years of success. She began to see the world differently, recognizing the profound importance of compassion, empathy, and connection. In the presence of Ethan and Lily, she understood that losing her fortune was not the end of her life, it was an opportunity to rediscover what truly mattered. The collapse of her empire, which had initially felt catastrophic, became a catalyst for personal growth and transformation. By the time Victoria left the building, she was no longer the same person who had wandered in that morning. Her steps carried a new awareness, her mind a new clarity. She had glimpsed a life lived without wealth yet full of meaning, guided by principles and human connection rather than material accumulation. The impact of Ethan's simple, unassuming acts of kindness had begun to reshape her perspective, revealing a path forward that was rich not in money, but in values that endure beyond fortune and fame. She had encountered a janitor and his daughter, and in doing so, had discovered a wealth she had never truly known, a wealth measured in empathy, integrity, and the capacity to recognize and cherish the humanity in others.